mayor's running a few minutes late. I think we have Mr. Payne in the back. We'll give him a second. Actually, I guess we can go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have 3 out of 5. So I hereby call this budget work session to order. We're going to be discussing the capital improvement program. May we have a roll call? Ms. Thomas?
Here.
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 So you'll just note the other two when they come in? Thank you. So we will turn this meeting over to the city manager for presentations on our CIP.
So good evening, councilors and members of the public. This is one of our second to last work session focused on the capital improvement program, which we assume that everyone knows what it is, but just so that everyone does know, it's our capital improvement program. So that's our infrastructure works, street sidewalks, traffic signals, various things of that nature, construction and things that we may be doing across the city as well. So Ms. Hamill's going to walk you through the agenda and kick off a basic review of what we have accounted for in the proposed budget as presented, that I presented to you earlier this month. And then we have some staff members that are going to come before you and speak specifically to a couple of things that are in the CIP. And then we're going to have more conversation about, depending on time, your follow-up on some of your discretionary spending that we've talked about in the last session and in between. So.
Thank you. Good evening. So as City Manager Sanders discussed, we'll review the CIP, talk a little bit about what changed or what has changed. We'll have Mr. Anthony from Parks and Rec come and speak, and also Mr. Goddard. And then we'll move on to talk about transit a little bit. Mr. Freese will talk. Then we'll have public comment and move on from there. So taking a look at the CIP summary, this is our 5-year plan. This is a slide you've seen before. And you'll note that from just dollars and cents standpoint, from a priority, education, transportation and access, and affordable housing are the top 3 areas where we are putting our dollars in terms of the CIP. For 26, you'll see that affordable housing is making up about 40% of that, education 19, and transportation and access are about 19. But if you look at the 5-year totals, they all are about equal. So that's just a perspective there in terms of where you're actually putting your dollars within the functions of the CIP. Again, the total for 26 is just under $32 million. Total for the 5 years is $189 million. We intend to fund this with about $138 million worth of bonds, about $47 million of cash, which is kind of shown here. The majority, 3/4 of our bond, of our CIP plan is funded by bonds. And then the general fund transfer, there is about $200,000 a year that's programmed to come from the schools, and about $40,000 which are public education access fees that are dedicated to the city's Channel 10 or studio in York Place. One of our budget guidelines or policy is that we do transfer at least 3% of the general fund to the CIP as pay-go or cash. If we were to look at that, that is about $7.9 million for the current proposed budget, and we're a little bit higher than that at 8.3 this year, or for next year, excuse me.
Sorry, can you say that again? The 7.3 is what it is 3%, but we're at 8 point.
So
Is that what
the 3% would be 7.9 million.
Okay.
And we're a little bit over that at 8.3, but that is because we have some projects that are cash funded, that make up the 8.3.
Okay, thank you.
So what is new in the CIP? I just wanted to go down through each of the sections just to give you some highlights. We'll start with education. There's and these are 5-year totals. So over the 5 years, we have increased the lump sum by $500,000 at $100,000 a year. The School Priority Improvements Program is receiving a $750,000 increase, or $150,000 a year. So both of those came out of our budget discussions with the school board. The city facilities capital projects, we are increasing the HVAC repair replacement account at $1.25 million, or $250,000 a year. Public safety, fire trucks, and EMS vehicles, the lead time and the cost of those are continuing to be interesting. Most of them are multi-year lead times, 3 to 5 years to get those. So we did shuffle around some timing of those, and we also did have actually a price reduction estimate. Of course, that is about 4 months old now, so by the time we get there, that may change again. But that is what is currently in the CIP. We also had put in $100,000 last year to repurpose or upfit the existing bypass fire station building once they move to the new one. We've increased that by $100,000 to more accurately reflect the cost of what would need to be done there, hopefully. And portable radios, replacement for police vehicles. We did not have a replacement program in place for those, and so we've added about $340,000 or $68,000 a year to get those on a replacement cycle. Transportation and access, new sidewalks, finally. We've heard a lot about this, lots of the last budget cycles. $4.8 million has been added. That is based and tied directly to the sidewalks priority list and the work that Mr. Chambers has presented to you. Sidewalk repair.
That's over 5 years, right?
Correct, all of these, yes. Sidewalk repair, we did reduce that by $500,000 in '26. That is because there's a larger balance that's sitting there, and we did that to better align the funding that we have with the work we know we're gonna get done. And then the ADA transition plan, that was a brand new project that was added this year. Over the 5 years, that totals $8.7 million. And Safe Routes to School was also something new that was added for a total of $1 million over the 5 years. Parks and Rec, playground renovations, increase of $460,000. That was an increase of $88,000 a year. That's basically just an increase to reflect the rising cost. We did, at the request of Parks and Rec, we shuffled around some of the funding for the trees. So urban tree planting increased by a total of $125,000. While I should have done this list in order, but we decreased the hazard liability ash tree removal account and reallocated those dollars both to the urban tree planting and the invasive plant removal account. We added $150,000 for Oakwood Cemetery for the drainage and road issues that we've heard about. The downtown mall tree management plan. Again, this was just an amount that was added in '26. That will most definitely be added to in the future as we receive that plan and council makes some decisions there. Parks master plan, again, same thing, $500,000 was added in '26 with future decisions. And Riverview, this was, I'm gonna take the hit for this. This project was not misnamed, but not named appropriately in the CIP. It is actually more about access management, and in the parking lot is only a small part of that. And so we are going to change the name to be more clear about that, and that was $250,000 that was added to the CIP.
Are we gonna hear more about that later?
We are.
Thank you.
And then for affordable housing, as you know, $7.8 million was added over the 5 years for the Carlton Mobile Home Park. So those are the high-level sort of new changes. Everything else was basically in the 5-year plan from last year. And I'll pause there to see if you have any questions or things you want to ask. I've given to you this sort of the summary that highlights everything that's in the CIP. If it's green, it means that the dollars were increased. If it's yellow, it means the dollars were decreased. And then if it's blue, it means it was added new to this 5-year plan. And that is also online if anybody's following along.
I do,
So-
oh, go ahead.
Walker Pre-K is projected for FY '28.
Yes, we're gonna talk about that later as well.
Can I just double check the 0 for sidewalk repairs, because we already had money set aside for that, so we don't need to spend any new money on it to accomplish the projects that we have on the docket.
Right. One of the things that I've been saying to you all is that we're looking closely at the CIP, and I am resisting continuing any effort to just simply add, because we've been adding on a schedule. If we have accumulated funds that have not been spent, then I'm pushing back on the team to say, what will it take to spend what you've accumulated, and what more do you need that you can spend in the same period of time? So for that reason, we're just not adding what we have been adding, and ensuring that those funds that have been accumulated are going to get spent, and anything above that is just enough for what they think they can spend in this next year.
Okay, and then, a couple of lines down, there's $100,000 per year for the next 5 years for, right-of-way appurtenance. Do we have those in mind, or are we just setting that aside for things that might come up?
Is that recurring? That's recurring, right?
It is recurring. I'm not sure if there's somebody from Public Works that can speak to if there is an actual plan or if
Does
that's.
Brendan know that? Right-of-way appurtenance? The recurring item for right-of-way appurtenance?
Yeah, there's
Do you know that?
$100,000 a year over the next 5 years for right-of-way appurtenance, and I'm just wondering if are there plans, or is that setting aside for things that might come up?
I would have to look at those plans. I mean, I do need to make sure that also it's not part of, I don't know if it could also include other departments for that. So I have to look in and get back to you on that one. That one I do not.
Thanks.
Could I ask what's different about the fire station?
The bypass?
Yeah.
So with the news station, then the plan is to allow that station to stay open and possibly be the fire marshal's office and other things that we need space for. So the goal was just to make sure that it was usable,
There had been 100,000 allocated, and now it's being up to 200.
so that it's enough to take care of what it would make it usable. Once we get everything out of there, we feel like some things might begin to fall apart, because the duct tape won't last.
Just get more duct tape.
That's why we need $100,000. Yeah, but it was really to limit it so that we could just make sure that we had enough money to touch it in a way that there could be members of the public that would come in there, but to also make sure that staff could use the space.
Michael, do you feel like the items that are here for affordable housing, those match your, maybe not your sort of ultimate list, but they meet the commitments that you think we've made?
In terms of everything in the CIP, I think.
The affordable housing, I was just.
Yeah,
wondering
yeah,
about-
everything in the affordable housing industry. I think so. I think it matches. The only question I would have, I can't remember, there's the MACA Park Street project, which we had funded in a previous budget. Is that either not part of the CIP, or was that one-time surplus funds when we funded it in that budget cycle?
That was in 25. 1.8 million was in 25, so there was no more funding requested in.
Okay, so it was just that one time.
Yeah, it's still there. And there may have been some money in 24, I can't remember the timing, but there definitely was 1.8 million in 25 for that. Yes, sir.
Have your right-of-way answer, if you want to take that.
Stephen Hicks, Public Works Director. We may need to retitle that. That's actually for guardrail work, replacement work on areas that needed guardrail replaced, i.e. if a tree were to fall down, damage it, or just in general, there's certain areas. So we looked it up. It's for guardrail work within the right-of-way.
Got it, okay.
All right.
And appurtenance to the right-of-way, AKA a guardrail.
Yeah, so that's my bad. I'll have to
And
retitle
it would
that.
also be interesting to know, like, do we spend all of that?
It's hit or miss. We could have an accident, although we process it through the insurance claim, or we could have a storm, and we could spend it, or then at the same time, there may be some left over. But what we could do is provide what our average expenditures are. But typically, what we ask is based on average expenditures.
Okay,
All
thanks.
right.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Sorry about that,
No,
y'all.
thanks for clarifying that. I didn't know what that meant.
And the 501 Cherry, that fits with the expectations and requests that we have so far from PHA?
Yes, that's their request. That doesn't address the grocery store.
Does not address.
Does not address the grocery store. That's a separate item.
And to clarify, were you asking about MACA or Park Street?
Yeah, I think it was kind of both, like it was PHA's project, like both, I think.
Okay, because there's two line items that were in the 25 budget. MACA was 1.8, and then Park Street was 1.1 and a quarter.
Okay. And that totally makes sense. I couldn't remember if they had like, additional requests beyond that funding we provided.
When would be an appropriate time for me to talk about Dogwood? Is that
Now.
now or later?
Sure.
Okay, well, I want to go through the rest of this first. So it seems like the downtown mall, you guys are making the investments that we've asked, or that have come up through the various plans that have.
From a CIP perspective, yes. I shared with Councilor Snook before that the downtown mall is considered one of the categories that I've identified for what I'll bring to you regarding the surplus, for that being a good one-time use set of funds. So there'll be some things that we'll try to prioritize being able to do. One of the thoughts is that we would first try to tackle things that would be in support and complement to the idea that the mall turns 50 next year, 250th anniversary next year. Many more people might be in town for that. So the goal would be to try to figure out what are some things that can be done in support of that specifically.
Okay. And the Parks Master Plan implementation, that's just enough money to get sort of going with putting together a plan for a plan?
Yeah, I do. And Mr. Anthony will talk to you in a moment about the other project, but that was meant to be just an opportunity for the Parks team to have some funds available to initiate the beginning of the implementation of the Parks Master Plan, because we knew that the plan was going to come after I would have closed the budget and/or presented it to you. And we would not have known everything at that point because we were still getting the final community input. The thought was to give some funds for urgent projects that could be addressed. So what I've asked him to do is to prioritize a list of access barrier projects within our parks that are identified in both the master plan and the ADA transition plan. So that's actually checking two boxes. In doing that, that gives him the window of time to digest the master plan and come back next year with what the 5-year ask is going to be, because we anticipated it would be a significant new addition going forward.
Okay. And the education projects matches what we've agreed to with the schools?
Yes.
Okay. I know there's still that one item they have about access security.
Yeah, I mean, that was.
Security audit.
Sure, and that too was an item that was after we had prepared the budget, and ultimately what came was not a list of prioritized items, it was just a list of items. And Mr. Goddard can speak to that when he comes up as well, but we have identified things that were already on that list, that we had on our list, so I think we know that we'll be able to get those things done to, again, prioritize checking those boxes. And we would be looking to the schools to identify other things. And that's part of what that lump sum relationship is all about, where he meets with them and kind of negotiates what the set of projects would be for the year.
Okay. And I know that one of the hopes this summer, I think you had, was for us to meet with the school board
Yes.
and develop a more long-term.
Yeah, and we have internally already started that conversation. Even today had a significant conversation about that. The thought for me is to coordinate with the school board a joint session for you to happen this summer, late summer, early fall, maybe around school starting, to begin some of that conversation. But before we do that, we need to have some internal discussions about our own assessments of facilities, and then work with schools to identify what they recognize as needs, and make sure that when we have the conversation of the two bodies, we know all the things that we need to know for what that bigger conversation is going to be, because it's going to be a very costly proposition and one that goes beyond one CIP period.
Yeah,
But to just make sure that we can think about that more globally.
yeah.
Yep.
That's important. So I'm going to sort of make a plea for the Dogwood Memorial Veterans Foundation, the Hill That Heals. I know that we've gotten literature over the last couple of weeks from them. I can see how this feels like to some folks, like, I can appreciate it. It's like out of the blue at the last minute. I think folks that have been on council for a while, though, know this group and know that this has been a consistent, they've been consistently trying to engage city council. I'm going to state some facts that I think are facts, Sam, and you can weigh in on whether you agree with me or not, or give further context. So, as I understand it, that foundation reached out to city council in late 2019, and at least in their understanding, got some sort of verbal approval or accommodation that the city would put into its CIP a certain marker amount of money in the CIP in 2020. That did not happen because of COVID and because of elections and other things. Their hope for that, their hope was to do that so that they could use that as something to help them raise money. One of the challenges they've had as trying to raise money for their foundation is the very city that they're working in, there's not been like a firm commitment acknowledged in the CIP. You did a lot of work along with the former city attorney, Lisa Robertson, on coming up with a language around a PPEA, which is basically a mechanism that lets us do essentially design build projects with groups. Subsequent to that time, they've reached out to, they've received $600,000 from the state. They have taken that money and they've gotten a set of drawings basically up through, I'll say 50%, at which point it would go out for procurement, and it would be a design build kind of option where you give someone the drawings and you say, contractor, finish these drawings and also build this for me. And they would be responsible for the building permit. The numbers that we heard the other day, total project of around $3 million, I think is what I heard. That group has requested that, the other night we talked about putting $100,000 in for FY26. They would like us to put in $500,000 for FY27 and $500,000 for FY28. That's my recollection of what they
Yes.
said the other day. With the notion that that is sort of a promissory note that they can use to help raise money. Their goal is to raise, I think, basically get a quarter of the money from the city, a quarter from the state, maybe a quarter from the county, and a quarter from fundraising. Was that your sense of it, roughly?
That's what we initially heard. That doesn't match what we're talking about now. If 500 twice is going to be more than that. So
Okay.
it would end up.
Maybe it's
it would be
250,
less, but yeah.
250 from the,
Yeah.
I'm not,
Sure.
yeah, whatever the numbers are.
Yep.
So I'm just making that pitch. I realize it feels late in the process. It's not for this fiscal year, it'd be for future fiscal years. I can appreciate, I know Councilor Oshrin raised the point last night, well, maybe there's a different way to do this that costs less money. When I got involved in this, essentially the notion had been, I guess, that when they built the John Warner Parkway, they were supposed to build a pedestrian bridge at the time, and so.
It was discussed, but there was no commitment. That was one of the issues that the group took with the project, and that it was being discussed. There was even reference to funds being set aside for it. That ended up not materializing. It was one of the first projects that I worked on
Yep.
upon arrival, and in coming here, discovered a number of issues with it, and the goal was to reset the conversation so that the project exploration could continue. And from that, we were able to confirm that there was no money in the CIP as once thought. There had not been an official commitment by the city to invest in the project, that the city was open to the idea that the group could pursue the construction of a pedestrian bridge and parking lot, because at one time that was even a question. So we were able to get firm commitment that we don't object to a pedestrian bridge and parking lot concept. We went through a review of what amounted to 3 options for the siting of the bridge and parking lot connection. We were able to work through that and eliminate 2 options as just not good options, and therefore 1 remaining option existed. That has been what the conversation has centered around since.
That's been for like the last 2 years, right?
Yes, and that has been what the focus has been, that what we are building is the option that exists, and that was signed off by the city engineer and traffic engineer at that time, and the parks director confirmed, because we had to really evaluate what was the impact to the park, because the McIntyre Park would be affected by this, and we had to make sure that it was going to work for putting this pedestrian bridge across the parkway, since that was not a part of its original design.
So anyway, hopefully everyone understands. I've had conversations with folks. I don't know how people will vote, but I'm wanting to put forward, again, $100,000 for this coming fiscal year and $500,000 for the next 2. If $500,000 is too much, we could talk about a number less than that, but I'll leave it at that.
Let me turn that on. I would like to clarify the suggestion that I made, because I was looking at the plans that were submitted and the context of where the suggested additional infrastructure would be. The fact that it's next to a parkway, which is in a park. We'd be adding parking to a park. All know how I feel about that. And just the amount of infrastructure going into this project, when I looked at a map and saw coming from the other direction, there's already a parking lot and a relatively flat path. In order to do my due diligence there, about an hour and a half ago, I went and walked that to see how comfortable it would be, how flat it really was, where we could maybe make an adjustment that wouldn't cost several millions of dollars, and help us be just aware of the additional infrastructure and location and capacity for adding car stuff to our land. The path from the parking lot on the other side of the skate park and that pedestrian bridge was lovely. There's tons of trees that have just been planted that are going to make it very comfortable and nice as soon as they get a little bigger. At the very end where it should connect to the memorial, there is a grade separation that would necessitate an additional path built. Just based on how kind of simple that connection would be, I think that would save the city a lot of money and still provide access to the memorial as requested. It's also much more pleasant to walk through a park than over a giant highway. So with all of that being said, I'm I'm where I was the other day, not keen to support this massive infrastructure project when there seems to be a simpler and more pleasant alternative that could easily be accomplished very shortly. And so I would like to look into that instead.
So, my thought on it, going back to when it was first being discussed in 2019, is that while I agree with a lot of what Natalie just said, the option of parking in the area near the rescue squad building there, their calculation was, I think it was like about a 1/3 of a mile trip from there to go up to the monument. And they felt that that was more than folks who are increasingly at this age likely to be handicapped would be able to handle. And I have a hard time trying to put myself in sort of the position of trying to decide how much inconvenience to handicapped people is too much inconvenience. I don't have a good measure for that, and I'm inclined to put a fair amount of confidence in the involvement of folks like Tom Vandiver and the Independence Resource Center, whose job it is to assess what is too inconvenient and for handicapped folks. The reality is that whether there was a commitment to build the bridge or a commitment to put a certain amount of money in the capital fund back when the John Warner Parkway was built, it was clearly contemplated at some level that there was going to have to be something done to allow for handicapped access to that site. I remember discussing with people right a couple of years ago about the question of access from up at the top of the hill coming across the bridge that's already been constructed over the railroad tracks. That's still a pretty long way to go too. It's not, it's not a quick thing. So I think it's something that frankly, if we had been on our game back when the John Warner Parkway was built, it would have gotten accommodated in some way in the plans for it at that point, and that really what we're doing now is trying to make up for the fact that it wasn't in fact incorporated into the plans. And again, I get back to saying I'm inclined to trust Tom and the IRC folks when they suggest what is too inconvenient for folks who are handicapped. I certainly would. I'm okay with $100,000. I told Mr. Eads when he and I talked today, in fact, I said I'm not necessarily sold on the $500,000 times 2 years, but I certainly think $100,000 to get things going, A, to help them with their fundraising, B, because they're incurring a lot of costs just in the planning of all of this stuff. I think is certainly something I would support.
Would you support $300,000 in those 2 out years? They need something to be able to fundraise against, which has been what they've been asking for 3 years.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I would like to have a more detailed conversation about what the alternatives are. And this is one of those things where I may well decide that I'm fine with exactly what they're saying, but I don't feel comfortable in getting quite there yet.
I'll add from the staff perspective and the many years that have gone by, there are 2 options. Option 1 is the pedestrian bridge and parking lot that we've been working on, and option 2 is what Councilor Oshrin has proposed. We don't see another option. We have worked through all the others, and that's how we've concluded that this is a viable project by eliminating anything else that is not.
So, and
And I guess option 3 is nothing.
What you were suggesting was to do something with the path coming down from up by the skate park.
Right, and I understand that in sheer number of feet traveled, it might be longer than when you park at the emergency vehicle center or a proposed new parking lot. The benefits of the coming from the other direction is you're in a park much faster, and there's no reason why we can't make that whole walk part of the experience. There's design elements so that you're not just getting somewhere, you're there already, and you have a nice park experience, not a by a 4-lane highway, crossing over a noisy 4-lane highway experience. And to me, that has value, not just the number of feet traveled. There's opportunity to expand the memorial, there's opportunity to make the park more integrated with the memorial, and that doesn't exist when you're just, let me get across this big highway.
So when I first started getting tours of the botanical garden, that was the plan, to have, kind of, a long bridge or access for the handicap to the Dogwood Memorial as part of that, but it was eliminated at some point. I'm not sure if because of the timing of the two projects or what, but I think that where we are is that I definitely support the funding of $100,000, and I think that maybe because right now we're having some smaller meetings, to have a maybe at a 4 o'clock meeting or something, just to talk through the alternatives, the two alternatives, so that we can just make sure we understand what the two are, because I'm supportive of it either. If the proposed one doesn't work, then because I've been to several of them, and what's going on now is definitely doesn't work. So, Michael, I haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts on it?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Even given, we've had a number of years, not at all disputing what you, Councilor Oshrin, have to say, but we have had, as this body, a number of years to evaluate options. It's always worth continuing to evaluate, but, just speaking for that group and the fact that they, from their perspective, have been long-suffering, even if we were to do some options evaluations, would that still be consistent with the possibility, Mayor, of putting $250,000 in for FY '27 and FY '28, realizing that we're not committing to a solution? Because if we don't
Yeah.
make some commitment now for 2 years from now, they don't have anything to raise money against.
Right. So
Which has been the holdup for years.
yeah. So I think that we need to do one or the other, and both of them are going to cost something. So we need to put some money aside for it. So I will be supportive of the $100,000 and some agreed upon amount in the out years, whatever, if we have the votes to support that with. So,
Mayor,
Yeah.
the challenge with what you just said that you would do, when I put on my former hat, you've just changed my fundraising proposal, because I'm not fundraising for a pedestrian bridge and parking lot anymore, and that's what all the conversations that they've had to date have been. You've now said it may not be that, it may be a different pathway or something to that effect. I don't know how helpful that is to them if fundraising is the outcome that they're trying to work on, if they now have to do this in a non-committal way to a funding source. And I'm just offering that from just my own understanding of how you do this.
Can I add a question
Mhm.
or a point also? I know we already there's already funding from the state for it. I don't know if that's tied to the bridge project specifically.
It is.
Or to the alternate plan.
It's to the bridge project.
Okay, but changing the connection of the path at the west side, would, I'm no public works expert,
Mhm.
but I can't imagine that would cost $100,000, in which case it could be fixed shortly.
Sure, that's
and
not the issue, though.
quickly.
I get that, but that's
yeah,
not really
if
the
that's
issue.
the alternatives that we're looking between,
I think almost anything will cost $100,000. Spending $100,000 on even a sidewalk is not a problem. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to make sure that you're doing is to stay focused on what it is that you're saying, that you're attempting to do. Appreciating that, yes, the walkway and set improvements to the walkway is a project option. That doesn't match what the ask is, so you were making a different decision. That is your purview to make that decision. That would need to be provided in a clear manner. I'm accustomed to walking away from our meetings and not having clarity on everything, but we have members of the public that are waiting for clarity on the issue, and I think that's my concern. We haven't really told them anything at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel like if we were just starting from scratch and there hadn't been all these conversations, I mean, I realize the notion of sunk cost and you can always make a decision, but I feel like from just the investment this group has made, the fact that it's been recognized by the General Assembly,
Yeah.
that's why I support the proposal. If we were to go back to before I was on council when this thing was first conceived, I may have had a very different perspective, but this is a group that's done a lot of work on its own, with a memorial that's the first in the nation or whatever. So that's why I support.
Michael, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously this has been discussed for a number of years. Well, first a question. So, and I should know, is the current site, is it ADA accessible in terms of if you parked under current conditions, if you parked at that area and then went to the memorial, the existing parking lot area?
Yes.
Okay. And
If you park where, which,
In McIntyre Park.
okay. Up there.
No, rescue squad.
but also McIntyre Park, I believe.
Oh, I thought that's what you were asking. The rescue squad, yes, it's just you're jogging and crossing the streets of traffic.
And for the McIntyre Park entrance, you come around the front and then go around the back, so there's extra paths
Yes.
to travel, whereas you could make a easier little connection on the
Right.
west side, but yes, it is already accessible.
And I know in years past, was the gradient of any of the paths adjusted to be more accessible?
I'm not going to get myself in trouble by saying the wrong thing.
Brendan Duncan, city engineer. So a lot of these discussions go back 8, 9, 10 years. There are very small sections of that have either settled over time, but the ADA allows for you to look at it in a larger span. So when you're looking flat area to flat area, we meet the ADA standards. No asphalt has been kind of torn up since it was installed with the John Warner Parkway. At that point, we worked with the veterans to redesign the whole site and get ADA accessibility there. So it has not been, the asphalt's not been redone since that time. The last time it was checked for ADA compliance was about 6 years ago, I believe. So it's possible that stuff has settled slightly, but it was ADA compliant at that time.
And then I just don't remember, it was about 10 years ago, you said, what changes were made to the site?
So when the John Warner Parkway was kind of constructed there, that whole experience was changed. It used to be that the flagpole was kind of the memorial. They built that whole retaining wall in front of it and created a whole kind of area there. So the flagpole has always been kind of the defining mark for the memorial. The flagpole never changed its location. That was how they were able to keep their original designation of, the oldest memorial in the nation that I know of. So that has stayed. The elevation of that didn't change, but they did kind of raise up that whole area in front of it with that project and build kind of a nicer area for everyone to get to. That was when the pathway that gets from the corner of John Warner and 250 up to the memorial was built. I don't believe if there was a path that wasn't ADA compliant before that. But that was kind of what was done at that point in time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've said, kind of my thoughts have been in, since I've been a part of this conversation, in a vacuum, the most straightforward and clear path would seem to be the option laid out by Natalie. I guess, I haven't been nearly as involved in these conversations as you have, Brian. I think there is a decision point for the city, basically. With the state funding, it sounds like Albemarle is potentially interested in providing some amount of funding.
For a bridge.
For a bridge, correct. And so I think it would seem to me the options would be, on the city's end, either we're okay with the option laid out by Natalie, that could exist on its own, but if a bridge happens and we're open to it happening, it would just be completely self-fundraised without city involvement. In any case, I've thought the most straightforward path has been the one laid out by Natalie. I'm potentially, given the state investment and the other things, if there's some clarity on what could actually be accomplished, I'm open to that. And maybe this has already happened, but I'd be curious more feedback from staff in terms of what is really feasible or needed on the city's end in terms of the amount of money. Because I don't know if that $500,000 over 2 years, I would just guess if we go that route, there's likely to be a more substantial investment needed from the city. And these are conversations that may already have happened as well. I'm also curious if a project of a pedestrian bridge has any potential tie-ins to improving park access beyond the memorial. Are there broader accessibility benefits? I guess all of which is to say, I guess I'm just I'm still skeptical about including, $500,000 over 2 years, and also whether that would be, if we went that route, whether that would be the total investment the city's needed to make.
What about 300 for 2 years?
Maybe this is information staff, maybe this is just, it's irrelevant to staff. I just have no insight into what number is.
Yeah, the challenge is, with any construction project, and this one's even even differenter, whatever, is that it's very difficult to say what the cost is going to be before you've invested the money in the design and you've gone and done all of the work to get a price. And when you add in the fact that this is a public-private PPEA, which is a very unique sort of procurement mechanism, that also makes it more challenging to say what the city's, understand the desire for clarity and what the city's actual investment is going to be. When you also add on top of that the fact that you've got 4 different entities potentially contributing to this, I just see this as a floor. I see this as a statement that, and maybe it's not $1 million, maybe it's 500,000. Basically, us saying this is what we are willing to commit to this group of veterans who've been working on this thing forever, many of whom are getting very aged. And if $1 million is too much, that's fine. Then let's just say 500,000. And I can also appreciate, Mr. City Manager, your desire for clarity before we just don't throw money in the CIP to be a placeholder. But I think sometimes that's not a bad strategy. We do it all the time at my job, where you're I don't know exactly what the future looks like, but I want to put something close to it. So I feel like, and again, I can appreciate everyone's perspective. I just feel like decisions were made 6-7 years ago to go a certain path. Maybe they were the wrong decisions, but we're at a certain point, and a lot of time and money has been spent in reevaluating that I don't see as valuable. And if we can't do 1 million, let's do 500,000. That is at least something towards their goal of 3 million and gives them some statement that the city,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to, go ahead.
I would like to add two more things. Since we've established that it is technically ADA compliant already from both directions, I would like to also think about the money that is being requested as an opportunity cost. We have a long list of ADA, we have a long list of places throughout the city that are not ADA compliant. If we spend this money on this bridge, what projects are not being accomplished with that money? That is everyday life usage for people who are not just veterans, but everyone else who uses the streets. And so that's something I also want to think about. We have option one, what seems like a relative quick, easy fix coming from McIntyre, and then you can expand the memorial up the pathway and make it a more fulsome experience throughout a park, which is lovely. We have option B, or two, a large infrastructure project that we are being asked to throw some sort of amount of money to, which I can absolutely appreciate that people have been working on this for a long time. But is the goal access, or is the goal to build a bridge? And if we already have access, then we can use that money for improvements elsewhere in the city. And then for the point about, it has been a process that's been going on for a long time, reevaluating past processes is kind of our whole job. That's what we've been working on. They, spent a lot of time years ago downzoning the city. We have reevaluated and have upzoned the city. We've evaluated several other things that past councils have done and projects that the city has worked on. So we reevaluate in a new context, in a new direction. And so being asked to do that, I don't think is a stretch for our responsibility as counselors, is to pay attention to that sunk cost.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Those are two
That's it.
things.
Yep,
So I
thanks.
think we just need to kind of get to some type of conclusion on this. I'm in the camp of $100,000 supporting the existing project with the bridge, which been planned. That's where I lay. Lloyd?
no money in the at our 2 years,
Yes, 200,000.
a year.
Yeah.
Well, I guess nobody currently on council, nobody in the city manager's office, with perhaps the exception of Terry Bentley, was around when any of these decisions were discussed. The last time they were even discussed, much less made. And I feel a little bit uneasy about, and I'll tell you what I remember of the discussions, which took place before I guess after I was elected, but before I took office, was that there was discussion about how they were going to be able to raise their own funds. There was a question of, there were some things that we needed to be able to do to help them out. And then it suddenly, in the last 3 months or so, the discussion became, actually it was in the last 3 weeks or so, that I first became aware that they were looking for $1.1 million. And that's a discussion that is just a whole lot different from the discussions that I remember having taken place in 2019 and so on. And because I have not had any need to go back and say to the folks at the RSC, the folks with the Dogwood Committee, whatever, let's really look through this and make sure that we understand about the ADA compliance issues. Let's make sure that we understand what is really convenient and what is not really convenient. We have not, none of us has been a part of those discussions. Maybe the city manager's office had some fairly recently, but none of the rest of us have. And this is also a situation where from a purely the science of decision-making, this is the wrong way for us to be doing it. We should not be doing it, we should not be evaluating the merits of the project for the first time at a budget hearing.
I can appreciate that, but I've been on council 3 years and 3 months. And this was something I learned about at the very beginning. And and there have been many conversations that have happened. Now, maybe more fulsome, I don't know, but there have been plenty of opportunities to have these conversations with these veterans. And, yeah, so there have been opportunities, and I know when I first came on council, it was stated, yeah, there's this marker out there for $1 million. I was always like, okay, that's fine.
Nobody could ever find.
Well, okay.
Nobody has ever found that
Well,
marker.
if we could find the transcript of the conversation that happened in the fall of 2019, would that help you
Well,
set aside $400,000 to help get this done?
when the first number that I remember for the entire project was $1.7 million.
And it's gone down because they've raised money and they found other partners.
That wasn't 1.7 that was being asked from the city. That was 1.7 that was gonna fund the entire project. And now we're looking at $3 million. Now, I understand why things have gone up, everything else has gone up. But I also understand that as far as I am aware, there has never been a vote taken by this body, not just us, not just us as individuals, but as this city council, that commits the city to doing anything. It's never been a vote that says we are committed to a bridge, that we are committed to 1.7 or 3 point whatever million dollars. And I just find myself feeling very dissatisfied with the state of the information that we've got at this point. I will repeat that I tend to want to honor the perspectives of the disabled or disability community in their assessment of what is too inconvenient. And I don't think that I am a good judge of what is too inconvenient for somebody who's in a wheelchair. But I also realize that I've never seen a plan, I've never seen a budget, I've never seen a design. Maybe somebody else has, but I haven't. And if you're asking me right now to commit $100,000 this year and either 200,000 more or 500, whatever the number is, I just don't feel comfortable right now doing that. If there's a way to, I mean, if we put a number on it for the next fiscal year, people are gonna start assuming that that's set in stone, and I don't feel like I'm really interested in setting that in stone.
So I think it's important that I clarify a couple of things, because this conversation has been going on for quite a long time. There has been no actual vote on the specific project of infrastructure happening in the city because that time has not arrived yet. The PPEA is the process that has been outlined. I have outlined that for everyone. I have laid out what my recommendation is on this matter, and that recommendation was to not put anything into the CIP at this time, get the PPEA done so that we would have an official project and budget, at which time council would be able to consider whatever it might want to do in the way of supporting the project. It is my understanding that the desire for the city to contribute to this project is well known and has been long known for a number of years. It has not been a formal ask in writing, in my opinion, until most recently, which I agree that that letter indicated what the specific ask was. But again, I've outlined, and I have outlined as a deputy and as the city manager on more than one occasion what I believe to be the appropriate steps. You're having a CIP conversation tonight, so that's what makes it appropriate for a discussion if you want to put something in for an out year. It did not come from me as a recommendation because I'm not recommending that. But that's your purview. You make the decision on what you want me to do, and we figure out how to make it happen. We have received some material information from the Dogwood Group as recent as this week. And that information has been now moved forward for us to be able to move forward on the PPEA actually happening. that would be the official moment for council to vote. But you all did actually indicate through a resolution support for this project. Council did this, and that was done to indicate to them that the city was not going to block its construction. That was a direct request that they made, and you all took that vote and approved it. That was the indication that I desired for the staff, because upon my arrival, I found a team of individuals frustrated with, we don't know what they want us to do, they being you. And I said, let me figure that out and we will clear this matter up. And we have done that by eliminating 2 options for siting this pedestrian bridge and parking lot and getting what we deem to be confirmation from council that there's an interest in allowing the Dogwood Veterans Memorial Foundation to raise whatever funds necessary to construct the bridge and parking lot. So staff has been working to support that. We have done a land lease to ensure that they can add additional bricks, which is a part of their fundraising strategy. We are days away from bringing that to you, I guess 2 meetings away from bringing that to you for a vote to approve that part of their strategy. And they have gone and gotten the state to support the project by adding $600,000 to their coffers to pay for it. Upon doing that, they ramped up their desire to see that the city and county joined in that support. I, again, did not bring that recommendation to you because at this moment, I don't know how much this project is going to cost, and I don't have a complete set of plans from someone to tell me what is it going to take to build this. And usually that is what I bring to you when I ask you for money. So that is why we are where we are at this time.
The nature of this project is different than a standard project.
I agree with that, and
Which is why
I'm
I'm not criticizing, but that's why you've struggled to be able to bring something to us concrete.
that is correct.
Because it's being built by PPEA, which is a different form of, it's not an unusual. form of
Actually
construction
established by the
procurement.
council for this purpose.
Right. And also because there's fundraising, there's a whole bunch of other people involved. So we can't specifically say, hey, we don't, well, go ahead, sorry.
So all that I wanted to make sure is that the understanding is known clearly what efforts have been taken to simplify and straighten the line out as to what it is that we have been doing and are attempting to do. It is my position on behalf of the staff that we have eliminated that alternative improvement from the existing access points, both having been deemed by those individuals who are advocating for this new bridge and parking lot to be too much. That is what I have heard consistently. It's too far, and to come from the car's parking lot requires a lot for individuals who have struggles. Regardless of ADA status, it's still an incline, and if it's an individual in a wheelchair and the person pushing that person in the wheelchair, it is difficult to navigate regardless of, again, ADA, meeting the basics of ADA. All of that has been expressed to me. I have spent hours with these folks. I have heard all of this for now a few years. And in all of it, I have been attempting to make sure that we move forward through a process that I can bring what is a responsible recommendation to this council, following everything that is me, discipline first, and that what I said was that I would support bringing whatever information to you all once we have a PPEA document that process that identifies what it costs. That's where we are. And that is everything from the staff's perspective. There is nothing else that anyone on my team can come forward and offer to add any further detail as to where we stand on this project. Which is why you're now having this conversation. So the question is, and you have to, I'm not going to say have to, you should make a decision at this point, because the last item on the agenda for tonight, I'm going to trigger this conversation all over again because you're interested in the $100,000, and that's on the list from last week's conversation. So it's still a matter of a decision needs to be made on something, or we move on.
But from a budgetary perspective, committing $250,000 in 2027, 28 doesn't have any impact on us now, right? I mean, it doesn't
It's not, yes,
screw up your budget that you have now.
right.
It activates probably 3 or 4 times as much money from other sources to help build something that supports a community need. just because it's there, we don't necessarily have to spend it. If that upside risk is too much for folks, I don't know. I mean, on one hand, these are large numbers. On the other hand, they're not really that large numbers when you talk about construction. So I don't know what it would hurt us to, in terms of like voting on things, like you said, we have, I don't know. This has come before us before. And, like the stuff with the schools or stuff with housing, these numbers float up and down a little bit. And I think that's just part of the process. Just like when we go through VCF and we're having these conversations, and $500,000 in a budget of this size is, for something that has been talked about for as long as this, I don't know why we would hold up on principle or form for this.
So, I think that, you and I support the $100,000. Lord, I'm not sure where you are on, at this point, the $100,000. Just,
I'm okay with 100.
okay, so not so much money in out year. Just, yes.
My concern with that, not knowing anything
I
at
got it,
all.
I got it. You're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'll leave it
I
at
got
that.
it. Natalie?
Not necessarily opposed, but.
Yes. I just wanna make sure I understand where you stand.
I'm not supportive of in years or out years for this.
Okay. Michael?
I would just quickly say, I agree with Natalie in terms of that making the most sense as the option. It's difficult because I think there is past dependency for the expectation of the veterans and their families, and nothing we will do will ever change what their expectations are. And that's the reality of it. I think I'm fine with the $100,000. I find it, I agree with Lloyd in that I'm not trying to dodge. I just genuinely find it, in principle, is having flexibility to put something in an out year. If it helps with fundraising something, I'm like, we should never do no. But I just have no basis for having any sense of what that number could be, would be, and I would worry that we would come back here in 1, 2, 3 years and be in a very similar place where that number just wasn't sufficient and didn't accomplish the fundraising goal. All which say that's my concern, the 100,000, I have no idea basis for a number. If there's some small placeholder in an out year philosophically, I can live with that. Even though I do agree in terms of from a planning perspective, Natalie's perspective, I think weighting the expectations of the veterans, that's the expectation in what they've worked on for many years.
And what is the county doing?
Well, the county's waiting on us and waiting on the fundraising, which again is all this is a park that's in the city. And so the expectation has been, they're gonna go do all this work and quote, at least the city will do something. And that's been the conversation for many years, and we've not done
So
something.
So the simple answer is the county has not put
Correct.
anything in their budget.
Correct.
Had it been intended to be in the budget, was removed or something?
I think that there was, Ann Malik reached out to me, I think they're probably in a similar situation to us,
Yeah,
but they're, again, people are waiting for us to get off go.
okay.
And,
So it appears that there is support for $100,000, but that's it.
Okay.
Okay?
And I would like to ask that if and when we are presented with options, to include the west side entrance upgrade. Just connecting the path on the west side.
What I need to clarify is no one's going to
That's-
present that option,
Okay.
because that's not what this is really about. It's about the pedestrian bridge and the
Then also, if
parking
someone
lot.
were to present that option, I would be interested in talking more about it.
Where that would come would be as a part of the parks master plan, if in the assessments by the parks team that there was a desire to further enhance that access point. That's where that would come up, and only then.
So, Chrissy, where are we?
We're at 7:09, I'm sorry. So we're gonna move to Mr. Anthony to give you an update on a couple items on the Parks and Rec section of the CIP.
And Rihanna, I'm just going to throw the curveball. as you understand this particular skate park area, I'm not talking about the memorial, has there been any consideration in the past of prioritizing some improvement of this pathway from the McIntyre Bridge area into the park, or is that just not something that has risen to the,
That has not risen.
okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure of that.
And just to clarify, it's relatively flat or a slight grade right up until you get to the memorial, and then there's a curve, so it would have to go around the little
Sure.
tops of trees.
Yeah.
Seems fairly doable.
Can I make one more point? Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This isn't meant as a dig or anything like that. I respect you guys. I'd say I even love you sometimes, most of the time. But we, Counselor Payne, we have made big bets on housing, on like buying a whole mobile home park for $8 million. We've made big bets without a lot of information because we felt like it served the common good. And we've done that a lot on housing. And this isn't just about a park, this is about representing and honoring veterans from our area. Is it perfect? If we had it to do over again, is it what we've done? No, but I think it's, we do this kind of, we have done this sort of, we're not breaking precedent or creating precedent or whatever. I think this is entirely consonant and fits within other things that we've done when we felt like there was really a need. All right.
Well, and again, as I said, I'm not even philosophically opposed to including in and out year some placeholder amount. I just genuinely, right now, at this meeting right now, I feel that I don't have any basis for having a sense of what that number should be. And that could just be a conversation.
When do we have to vote on the budget?
14.
14.
All right.
Okay. You good?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anthony, I think.
Rian Anthony, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm just here to give a quick update of Parks and Rec CIP. As you can see, Parks and Rec has been very, very busy. If you notice, we have a placeholder for $500,000. We've worked very closely with our ADA coordinator. We are looking at projects that we can meet the needs of the community. So one of the projects is Washington Park outdoor restrooms. Per our master plan, it calls for a lot of investment, reinvestment in our assets, and our assets are not in good condition. And so Washington restroom is one. Forest Hills restroom is also one that doesn't meet ADA. We're also looking at certain parks with access. Access meaning from a parking lot, how do you get to a dog park? How do you get to a playground? So we're trying to connect those easy connections so that individual that is disabled will be able to have a easier transition plan all the way to a playground. We're also looking at upgrading our Key Recreation Center bathroom. If you look at the Key Center, everything is upgraded, but our restrooms have not been upgraded and needs also to be focused with our ADA lens. So those are just a few projects that we will be doing, as I like to call it, the small projects that we don't have to wait for. We can easily implement that projects.
So has there been like big changes in how restrooms at parks are designed and maintained from, I don't know, the parks that you mentioned that were replaced and done 20, 30 years ago? You know, is it a different way that they're, constructing them?
Yeah, so when you upgrade restrooms, you have to meet the ADA compliance. And our restrooms are not ADA, as you just mentioned, because it was built 20, 30 years ago. And we're having a lot of challenges. with our communities, folks in the wheelchair that cannot access certain stalls, cannot even open up the restroom door because the door is not even ADA compliant. So we have to look through those lenses.
And I know that this is, and I think, Sam, you're saying out years, it's gonna be more with Parks and Rec. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the plan was, because Ms. Hamill and I talked about it a lot, of what are we going to do on the master plan, the parks master plan? And just again, thinking that the appropriate approach would be assume that we know that the list is going to be huge, give the team something to work with in the first year of its existence in our hands, knowing that it is not a full category of things, but at least something to
This is
begin
something
with.
we know.
And these are absolutely things that we know that have been on the list that we've been trying to get to, so now we can activate those, and it gives Mr. Anthony time to work with the team to bring back future requests.
Any questions on this? That's $500,000. Thank you, sir. Oh, did you say?
I don't have a question about the 500,000, but while you're here, downtown mall infrastructure repair is $100,000 a year. Is there a specific thought in mind about what things are gonna get done for $100,000?
So the 100,000 is just our annual care and maintenance of the downtown trees. Because what we have figured out,
Those
probably
are
around
for
about
trees?
the downtown, the
Okay,
100,000.
I mean, the
This
tree
is the
management
account
plan
that's
is
funded by the cafe
315.
permit.
Oh, the cafe permit, sorry, I apologize, the infrastructure plan. Okay, the infrastructure, that 100,000 is small repairs, i.e. Mortar on bricks are popping out, we use that. We also use there for some electrical problems that we do have on the mall. We also take care of the downtown mall power washing. So that funding is strictly for maintenance and repair of smaller projects.
Okay, so it wasn't that there is a particular problem in mind that's gonna go.
I think it's Tuesday, I took a tour with Steve Gaines and the landscape architect. We started here and walked to the end of the mall, and they know every single tree, and I got a history on each tree, it was amazing.
By name,
Yeah.
like there's Fred. that-
Yeah, and I encourage y'all, if you all want to, he's definitely open to doing it. You learn a lot, and the work they do is really, really important, so it was very educational for me, so I'm glad that you set it up for me. Thank you so much.
And I have one more item to just update, and that's our Riverview Access Management Plan. It's exactly a study. I was going to do a presentation, but I thought I would just, again, this is just ask for $250,000 to look into our access management plan. So access management plan for a park is very critical because it directly impacts safety, traffic flow, and user experience. This park, when you design a park, it is for pedestrian, cyclist, and recreational use so that we get to control vehicular access to minimize accidents, conflict, and potential injuries. Clearly designing good access points avoids emergency vehicles to respond quickly to prevent blockage, meaning a lot of cars are parking, they cannot turn around, so emergency vehicle takes longer response time to get there. So what I'm requesting with this funds is to really for Parks and Rec to do some investigation on how do we improve public access at Riverview Park.
So Councilor Usher and I think will have a much better response to this. We talked about this before. I'm not, after what we just went through with the gas decarbonization study and some of the other studies, I live in a world of consultants, so I understand the reason for consultants. They augment what we can do, and sometimes it's a better approach, but I'm kind of burned on studies right now. And that's a lot of money for a study, is that what is the scope? What do you think they're going to tell us? I mean, I think we've got some philosophical differences on council about, and hopefully Councilor Oshram can speak to this in a minute, but, maybe we don't want to have more parking there, or maybe, we just rearrange, we restripe it or something. I don't want to minimize or downplay. I know these issues are important and you've thought about them a lot, but anyway, that's just my initial reaction to that.
Any other thoughts or comments on Parks and Rec?
Yes, on this project, how come it costs $250,000?
So, $250,000, we have a concept plan right now. And what the study is going to be looking at is, there's only one ingress and egress. We're looking at the amount of people that use that park. And over the summers, we know we have a access problem. Reason being, this is the only city park that has river access. Meaning,
Has what?
river access.
Oh.
That's the only park in the city that has
Because
river
Zero
access.
East High doesn't count as a park yet?
It does not. Yeah. And I just lost train of thought. So that's the only park, and each park has different uses. This use is kayaks. So that means it's very difficult for telling community members or people that come to the park is to use, for example, a different mode of transport. They need some vehicle, and most of the vehicles are either having a extension to their vehicle where they are putting the kayaks. There is no spot to even park and drop off your kayak at the existing park, and that's what the cause is, because it started out as a neighborhood park, but it's becoming a destination park. So that means we are looking at when a company comes in to drop off kayaks, we are finding cars parking. Not parking, but waiting in line to get in all the way up the street. And neighbors cannot move because we get the phone calls at the end of the day is to say, I can't move the park. What's going on in the park? I do not have a ranger program to send someone out there. But when staff is out there, that's the problem, because the vehicles can't turn around because I have an extended trailer that I have my kayaks. They can't, they're having issues, and it's just extend this. What we are proposing is looking at, is there another access point? So when we go into the park, there's a clear sign that to say, kayak drop off, take right. You drop off your kite and you get out. You're gonna use the park, take a left, playground, go park left, just so that there's easy accessibility.
And so what would the study need to do? It seems like we already have a plan.
That is just, again, that's the concept. The study is going to look at by how many people are using it, really looking to see if that is the cause of the issue, and then making a plan. Again, this is not about increasing parking spots. This is all about how do we get people in safely, and how do we get people out safely without causing a backup on our streets.
Or is there more than just the Ravenna River Company that has a trailer?
Yes, there are other companies that will come in, because again, that's a drop-off. If you look on the maps, Riverview Park is their pickup spot as well. When they go all the way from Downtown down, you can book your trip to start up there, and people will pick you up.
Mm-hmm. So it's not really general public with trailers, it's the companies that operate river
It's both.
companies?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's both.
So yeah, okay, hang on, another question. How many times have emergency vehicles been called to the park?
I don't have the accurate number, but I know last year, what I personally got, because they don't call me, they will call the emergency vehicle, I know at least 4 or 5 times.
Okay,
Yeah, and again, if you think about this, we get most calls that I can only recall, I can only talk of myself, is going to be an individual that is intoxicated, that got off the water, because that's what it is for kayak, and they're drinking on the river. That's fact. So they come, they get over the stop, they're intoxicated, they can't hawk, someone calls the emergency vehicle. And that's where emergency vehicle or fire department has a hard time, is to response time to get to the individual, because they're either leaving the emergency vehicle outside the park because you can't get in, or it's taking them a long time to get in. And then the hardest part is for them to get out. And there's no turnaround for an emergency vehicle to turn around and
I
get
mean,
out.
there's a big loop at that back of the parking lot.
Not
The
for-
truck
not for
cannot
fire
circle.
trucks.
Yeah,
Sorry,
not with a
what?
fire truck.
If cars are there, it's.
Did you say not for a fire truck?
Yeah, if there's cars, because
Then
it's
why do we
parking.
need a fire truck for an intoxicated person?
Because we sometimes have fire trucks that respond as the emergency vehicle that's available.
Yeah.
It all depends on what other,
Some of the
Things
things
are
that,
happening.
that's concerned me about this is, there's not a lot of park there already. You know, there's the woods that start there where the trails are, then there's the parking lot, pretty immediately there's the playground, there's not tons of space, and then there's the river. So any kind of asphalt expansion pretty much immediately cuts into the playground. The turnaround is often filled with cars. That seems like those cars are taking the opportunity to park there, paint, signage, enforcement, leaves that space available. Something that is not politically popular to say, but is very true, is that the streets surrounding the park belong to the public. The homeowners who live on those streets do not own the asphalt in front of their house. That is community space. The same, and this is how I've described it to other people on here, the same way if you're heading downtown to go to a restaurant, you don't expect to pull right in front of the restaurant and park there. You might park a couple blocks away and walk in. That's the same way a public park could also work. There's street parking nearby, there's bike access, there's trail access. There's different ways of going to the park. When you increase parking, that's part of the plan. Initially, it was called that, so I assume there is some sort of parking adjustment going on there. You're also inducing demand. More people expect to be able to park instead of finding alternative ways to go. If it's known as a difficult place to park, people aren't gonna, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. The old Yogi Berra saying, you make more access, then people think I can park, and now more cars show up, and then where are we? We added 20 spots, there's 40 more people who want it. We had 20 more spots, there's 60 more people who want it. You never can sate demand. So increasing parking, in the same way the Katy Highway in Texas keeps getting wider, traffic doesn't get better. It's not a solution. So increasing car parking is not going to make the park more accessible, and I want that to be something that people understand. And if that changes the scope of the plan, so be it. If we're talking about adding a boat ramp, I have a hard time seeing how that's a $250,000 study.
And again,
Especially given, as Councilor Pinkston said, we spent $300,000 on the decarbonization study, we spent some amount of money on the trash study. Both of those didn't do what we wanted them to do, or changed the scope in some way that didn't manage expectations properly. So that's a lot of money that could be used for something else parks related, such as the actual infrastructure. If this was a discussion about building a boat ramp, making the lighting better, and all of that, that's one thing. Expanding parking, hard no. And the point of community park is for families and kids and people to play in it. If you make it something that is focused on the cars, you're taking away the space from the people that are using it. So that's something I also want to be very cognizant of as we talk about park development, is parks over parking.
So let me just say that I think we need to make sure that we stay focused on what the ask before you is. The ask is for funds to do a study. I believe your comments have proven why we need a study. We don't know what to do, and we know we have a problem. That's the purpose of the study, is to determine what are options, what are solutions. So the reason that the $250,000 appears in CIP is to provide the room to determine what can be done to improve the conditions, the experience, the safety issues, the access issues. What those recommendations end up actually being, yeah, we'll come back and you'll get that as the study result. This isn't $250,000 to add parking to the park. That's not even close to what it takes.
And so is
This is about studying the issues and
Yeah.
then coming up with a set of recommendations.
And is this not something we can do in-house?
It is potentially something we could do in-house, but then you don't have the benefit of an expert who looks at all these issues together and gives you a recommendation. So if that's the pleasure of the council, that you want to direct staff to figure it out, we'll figure it out. We don't know when, but we'll get to it.
One of the things that struck me as I was down there recently is there are a number of places where there are manhole covers, where I would not have expected there to be manhole covers, suggesting that there are some interesting infrastructure problems in that site.
It's
And I would
evolution of time.
imagine that one of the things that would be discovered in the process of doing this sort of study would be to understand those.
Absolutely.
The
Conditions of the
physical
park is a part of the
constraints.
analysis, yes.
RWSA, it goes all through there.
So I think that I support, proceeding with the study, not so much at this point whether to proceed with the expanded parking lot or whatever, but I think we need to understand what the project is. Michael, do you want to chime in?
Well, one, obviously, the original, it was defined as Riverview Park parking lot. What is the scope of the project just looking at access at that parking lot area? Is it looking at it in combination with the Zero East High property as now an access point?
Yeah, so good question. So it's looking at access, number one, but also what will that Zero High property will be in the future, and how can that complement that at the same time? So if you really look at it, if you look at access, but you know there's a property sitting there, we don't know what the property is going to be, but we want to build something that will complement. And if you just see what's happening at the park right now, we are busy with the restroom infrastructure at the moment. Yep, the restroom is happening. We are having stream restoration. And what that suggests to me that more and more people will be coming, because the restoration project, the riverbank will be looking much beautiful, much more stable. We are just more and more people will just be coming. So what Parks is doing is looking around the corner, because that's what we do. Not looking for today, but looking around the corner is to say, hey, we see this coming in stages. We need to be prepared. And our first step is not just saying, hey, we are going to build an access, as I just explained, this is what I'm thinking. But we really want to understand, what does this look like in 5 years? Oh, this is the plan that we expect, that more and more people, and so let's build something so that we'll be able to.
And in that long-term
access.
plan, I also
Yeah.
want to consider the fact that we are improving our trail connectivity
Yep.
and access from different points throughout the city, so people
Mhm.
don't have to put their bike on their car to drive somewhere. They can leave from their house, get on a trail and bike somewhere. They can walk, they can get there in ways that aren't car-centric and car-forward. You can't expand more into that space and be able to satisfy all of the new people that are gonna get there.
Great.
Looking forward to the study.
Thank
Well,
you.
I guess I am just skeptical. Zero East High I think, is going to see increased demand. There's going to be increased participation revenue at River Company. Things happening there. I mean, what, if any, assurances that there's not $250,000 spent on a study? At the end of the day, if the goal is, like, if the only option is significantly increasing the amount of asphalt at the two entrances to the park, and that's something that council is not interested in at that time, to Councilor Pinkston's point earlier, like, and maybe I'm just not envisioning what this study entails, but what is to prevent a dynamic like the decarbonization study, where we spent a very significant amount of study to get to a point where it was just ultimately a decision council knew from the start, we're just not interested in pursuing that path? Or am I just completely misunderstanding the scope?
I think the scope is all about access and safety. It is, how do we get into the park and how do we exit the park because of the amenities that the park has offered. We know there's a river access. That means there will be kayaks, there will be tubes coming. And at the moment, if I have some form of vehicular way of transporting, I'm not going to park up the street and try to walk with my kayak all the way into the park. But how do I get someone to come in, drop the equipment, and then leave and park somewhere on the street? That is one of the scope, is to find how do we get people in safely and how do we get people out safely in a more efficient and effective way.
And also, just to, again, to try to make sure that we are explaining what we're doing here. This is $250,000 to provide for a study to be done. We don't know that it's going to cost $250,000. That's just a number that we know that we need to have available because it could be somewhere in that ballpark. The scope is about access. Access means we're going to look at what the problems are, we'll identify what the solutions are, and we'll come back and determine what could be. Is it possible that the recommendation would be an expansion of asphalt? Absolutely. Why? Because today it's not big enough for what it's trying to accommodate, and the goal is to solve how you can accommodate what is happening. If we need to create a space for different access points for those who are trying to access the river with a boat, and they have their boat on the back of a ramp, back of a trailer attached to their car, we need to separate them from the people who are already parking. So yes, there's going to be an expansion possibly in making that happen. We're not trying to predetermine what that is, but yeah, the possibility is there. The study is meant to frame what is possible so that we have options and then we make the decision on what it is that we're going to do. That's what we're doing.
And I just want to quickly point out that tubes don't require a trailer. Kayaks often are strapped to a roof rack. There's not really the kind of boat trailer that we're thinking of for kayaks unless it's a multi one, like the ones that the Ravenna River Company has, where you can stack several on top. A single person in a kayak's not dragging that behind their car. And as someone who has used a kayak on that river and walked it home, it's not impossible.
So I think we have support.
Do we want to study or not is the question.
To do the 250, to do the study. We're not approving the what it recommends.
Yeah, just want to outline, if we do end up doing this study, the scope has to be something that I would like to see before it goes forward. That's something that I thought we didn't have enough. When we asked for the trash study last year, we just got it a year later and didn't get approval on, is this the direction that you wanted to go in? So I think it would be helpful to find out if this is the direction we want to go in before we spend up to 250 on it.
Well, I think there's lots of access questions and lots of different ways to manage it, which I think are important. I think if the scope is a significant increase of the amount of asphalt, I do think it will just reach a point where council at that point won't approve that. I don't think the community will support it either if it's not something that's looking at improving drop-off and relying on Riverside Avenue or other areas as a place to then, once you dropped off that equipment, park there. So I think that's just the risk I see is paying $250K and getting to a point. I strongly doubt council and the community would end up supporting significant new increases in the amount of asphalt, but.
So, there's support to move forward. Please provide the scope.
Well, I don't think I've weighed in. Nothing. You're looking for 3? You guys are for, you're against. You're against?
I mean, depending on the scope.
I mean, I talked to Councilor Oshern about this the other night and really respect her views on this particular topic. I appreciate where you're coming from. I appreciate where you're coming from. I live in this world every day. It's a problem. We need to study it to come up with options. I think the struggle is we just came off of at least one study that I thought was not worth the money and time we spent on it. I would be interested, like Councilor Oshern said, to have a little more sense of who you're using, what their expertise is, what the scope is. And one of the, I think, the constraints on the study ought to be, yes, maybe expanding it slightly is something that we end up having to do, but that one of the constraints be, we really want to minimize any potential asphalt increase, because clearly that's not something that people want. So if that could be part of your your considerations, then I would support this. I feel like you guys, you wouldn't be coming to us if you didn't feel like this would not be helping you solve a problem that the community has raised. I just think that the points that have been made are important, and also, I don't know how much capacity we have in-house to do this kind of thing. Maybe there's more capacity than we know, and we didn't have to, I don't know, for example, the gas study, well, I don't have to go there, but if there are people in-house that you could just do this more cheaply, that is a recommendation. Take it you're for it.
I'm for the study.
So,
We'll
say-
figure it out, and we'll make sure we share it with you before we do
Okay.
anything.
Thank you.
So moving along, we're gonna ask Mr. Goddard to come up to highlight some school projects.
Our project manager.
Good evening, council, members of the public. Mike Goddard, Deputy Director of Public Works, here to bring you an update on what's changed in the proposed CIP relative to school projects. It's not a whole lot. First, we have a move of, there we go. Oh, wow. We have a move of Walker funding forward 1 year. So when we originally anticipated doing this project, our position, or my position, was that we wanted to protect ourselves from getting overwhelmed by having two projects running concurrently. And there has been, so the way that that was planned to work was that as we were finishing up construction on the Buford project, or now the CMS project, there would be an overlap of the tail end, the tail end of that construction work with the beginning of design work through the summer of 2026. There's been some requests or perceived requests from the school board to move that forward 1 year. And I think that that is reasonable at this point. So the proposal here is to move the design funding, the $4 million we have for the design of the pre-K center, from fiscal year 27 up to fiscal year 26. Impact would be that we begin design work this coming summer on that project. So we're already through schematic design. So we would just pick up and finish up with the design documentation. And then fiscal year 28 is when we had the $26 million for construction funding. We're proposing to move that to 27. So there would be an overlap of construction now of the summer of 2026. So there would be two projects going at once. I think we can manage that, so I am supportive of moving that forward.
So ahead of schedule, and maybe we'll save some money by getting done earlier.
Yeah, time is money these days, so we're hoping to save a little. So yeah, we're feeling pretty good about how things are going, so I think it's prudent. There has been an adjustment to the funding for the Priority Improvement Program. Just to remind you, that's the smaller scale projects to do modernization work in the schools. So far, we've gotten through all of the elementary schools and done the restroom project that you all have seen at Charlottesville High School. Really, the $1.4 million is just an increase to keep up with inflation and to keep us effective in delivering those projects at their full value as money becomes more valuable. And then finally, this isn't actually a change. It's just I wanted to make a clarification while I had a captive audience on the school's lump sum funding. So there was a conversation recently about the desire to fund security audit projects or in response to the school's CIP or the school's security audit. I wanted to point out that the school's lump sum is funding in 2026 a rekey project for both CHS and K-Tech. We've already done several of the elementary schools out of that lump sum, and that's work that was specifically pointed out in the security audit. We're also going to do some door replacements, which are desperately needed. So I just wanted to sort of toot our horn. It's work that we already kind of had going in the background, but it's also work that clearly everybody believes is important. So that's all I have for you, if you have any questions.
We've had several meetings on this, but others have comments on this?
Specifically, the request to shift the Walker pre-K is something we need clarification on because that would be a change.
That sounds like a positive change.
Yep.
Yeah, but I need to hear that
Yes,
from
please.
you.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
You're not taking anything for granted, huh?
I'm not supposed to, no.
Yes, I'm supportive of it. Lloyd?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
I assume the reason for it is basically good news, that things are going along pretty well.
Yeah, I think the Buford project was the biggest thing we had done in quite some time. We were a little nervous, and there have been hiccups, of course, but I think we're feeling pretty comfortable with the scale of the work and our ability to deliver. So I think moving it forward makes good sense to us.
Yeah. Cool.
It's awesome.
Yep.
When we first came on board, it didn't seem like it ever happened, did
No.
it?
It's been a long road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, so we're gonna transition to Mr. Freese, talk a little bit about transit.
No one wants to get there.
And Mr. Williams. I tried, Garland.
I appreciate that.
It's always more fun to share the hot seat.
Yeah.
Little bigger so you can see.
Good.
All right, so, and to know we're shifting off of CIP and onto operations. But at our last work session, there was some conversation around transit service, CAT service. So we thought we'd provide a little more context, a little more information, looking back at the last 5 years and the improvements to the system over that time, and looking ahead as to our planning efforts that are underway and that process going forward. First, wanted to just clearly state what we, I think, had talked about last time, which is that the FY26 proposed budget, as presented, invests just over $600,000 into, and that's new money into CAT. And that's covering really three things. One is the replacement for federal funds that have ended, CARES Act, and then also the funds that were allowing us to offer service fare-free. So that means we are going to continue offering fare-free service going forward. But additional money was needed to support that. Second, we of course have continued increased costs derived from the collective bargaining agreement. So additional new support for that. And then lastly, we did add a maintenance position in as part of this FY26 budget. So I wanted to note, make clear, those are the three investments, again, totaling just over $600,000. And then as a reminder, last year, we invested just over $1.8 million into CAT, and that included within that is the 8 additional drivers that were added last year. But, and then
Say
on
that last piece again.
last year, in the
drivers you added last year?
we added positions within the budget.
Last year.
Last year.
That
Around
was-
this time last year.
That was the appeal that people came and.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
600,000 that we found and decided to put
Right.
towards
So I added
drivers.
those 8 additional drivers. Yes, I'm sorry.
25.
For this year's budget, yeah, FY25.
But those positions have not all been filled.
No, right now, we are at, we have 66 total positions, including those 8, and 62 of them are filled as of, today?
That's good.
That's all kinds of positions or?
No, those are
just
drivers, that's just drivers. because you're recognizing that there's a lot of support positions that are necessary for drivers to be able to do their jobs, right? Like the maintenance worker we're adding this year, maintenance workers, customer service.
But that's
cleaning
62
crews.
drivers.
62 drivers today.
How close does that take us to pre-pandemic?
Well, Ray didn't
Oh,
talk about
sorry.
pre-pandemic because that's what these slides are here to talk to us about. Because we've been talking a lot about pre-pandemic being as kind of the standard that we've set, right? That we're striving towards. And I think one of the things we want to do today is point out that it's actually a little more nuanced than that, right? Because when we think about the outcomes, what are we striving for? Why are we adding drivers? Why are we adding money? We got to look past pre-pandemic and really get more specific about what it is that we're looking for. So the first chart that you all have there is the pre-pandemic. And so we say roughly, we had the equivalent pre-pandemic of about 72 drivers. And I say roughly, and I say equivalent because we relied a lot back then on temporary relief drivers to do the bulk of the driving. And as a result of that, there was a certain degree of there was a certain lack of reliability in that, because those drivers, the relief drivers, they can choose not to come in, and if you don't have drivers on a given day, there may be a bus that doesn't run. And then the other aspect of that is recognizing that those were relief drivers that were frequently being asked to work nearly full-time, but weren't receiving any benefits. So what have we done over the last 5 years? It's really important to recognize that we've professionalized the service over the last 5 years by making far more of our drivers professional, fully benefited drivers. So we've actually moved towards creating jobs that offer economic mobility, while at the same time improving the reliability of the service and the frequency of that service over time. So if we look at the chart here that represents, it's the fall 2019 one. Now again, we're just looking at weekday service in this case. We're not looking at weekends. We can talk about weekends, but we're focusing in just on the weekday service right now. That first chart shows that while our service extended later into the evening, it had some positive things. Extended later in the evening, the trolley service was at 15-minute service. Oh, let me start with the colors, sorry. Red, greater than 60 minutes, obviously. Yellow is 60-minute service, and then the green is 30 minutes or less. And obviously, that's green, that's our target. We're aiming for 30 minutes or less over time. So that first one has some benefits, has some positive things, extended service and all those things. And you recall that we had full weekend service in that time period, including Sunday service. But we also had some things that weren't so great, like all the red that you see within that table. And you also see some variability in the times, stuff like that. We've really tried to move towards a more regular system with regular time intervals that are more predictable for your riders. And then you see there the total ridership, and I can't even read it from here. What does that say? 1.3. So FY 2020 ridership 1.3. So then we go to COVID and everything we experienced there. And one of the things you see is that the time frame in which we're offering service tightens up so that we're ending at 9 a.m. predominantly. But you also do see some improvements in terms of some of the other measures that we use, like the regularity of the service, and some of that red has disappeared. Service went down, if you look at FY21 and FY22, to just over 600,000, and then in FY22 rose again to 1.1. So if we go to the next slide, next page. And we're looking at pre-November 9th, and I want to differentiate. Pre-November 9th and post-November 9th is basically accommodating those 8 additional drivers that we added last year into the system. Again, we didn't have all the drivers, but the timing starts to reflect the availability of those positions. We've got, even before that, we already have a system that's got no red on it, right? And we're starting to extend past 9 p.m. on some routes. And then finally, you get to the post-November 9th of this year, and there's a lot more green showing up. More lines are extended. In fact, we're at a point now where we've got 7 lines that are predominantly in the green, predominantly offering 30-minute or less service, which is more than what we were offering pre-COVID.
It's looking a lot better.
It's looking a lot better. We still don't have Sunday service. You know, we acknowledge that. We still have limited service that's extending past 9 and 10 p.m.
So is this saying that we are back to before pre-pandemic?
What I'm saying is it's nuanced,
Okay.
right?
Could I note, by the way, that you've got the same numbers for FY 2023 ridership as for FY 2022?
FY '23 and FY '22 are the same exact ridership numbers?
Yes, every month.
I think that, I have to check the team, but it looks like
Copy and
she.
paste.
it's a copy
Cut
and
and
paste.
paste there, yeah.
Copy and paste
We'll
there.
get you the right ones, but it's 1.1, both of those years, the difference is negative.
But if you look at,
But we're coming out of COVID.
we-
We're coming out of COVID and our ration started.
But FY '24 is actually 1.3 roughly?
It is.
and that was, and the last one should say FY '25, right? And that's the current year.
Yeah.
It should. And that current year, we believe we're on target to exceed the 1.3.
And then, like, I don't know what the exact date would be, but if you went back like 2015, 2014, is ridership like roughly half of what it was?
Say it one more time, I'm sorry.
Like if you were to kind of expand it out and look at ridership in like 2015, 2016, we're about half the ridership we had back then?
Garland Williams, Director of Charlottesville Area Transit. I can get you the exact numbers, but when I first got here, one of the things I talked about was getting on the side of what I call it a death spiral for our ridership. It had been declining year after year. I believe 2016 or 17, we were at 2.1, 2.2 million riders. So we've lost a significant portion, but we're hopefully making significant changes in the headways to make it more standardized and more frequent with the effort of putting most of our resources in the weekday right now to take advantage of the state's model also. The more ridership we have, the more money we get from the state. So that's the adjustments we're starting to make now. Knowing that we have limited resources and we want to be good stewards of the money that you give us, we want to put the money where we know it's going to be most effective.
Couple questions. First, can you help me understand this chart? So if I'm looking at the hours across the top and then the time below, is it at 6:23 a.m. the number 4 arrives, and then at 23 minutes later?
Which one are you talking about?
Just-
Which chart?
Yeah, just like
2019,
any of
fall
these.
2019.
Like, how does this?
No, the top,
How
so
does
great,
this-
yes.
How
Great
do you?
question.
How should we interpret this?
Council Arson. Great question. So if you'll go back to the first slide, because I'm going to reference to the one she's referencing.
Assuming it matches the same
Yeah,
for all of them.
yeah. The map, the charts are the same. We just added the ridership totals a few hours ago. But so the maps, the charts on the top, when you talk about 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., that's when service is being operated. And then you look at the 60 or 30 or whatever, that's the frequency of the service at that time.
So, for example, the number 4
Mhm.
comes at 6:23, but then 23 minutes after
No,
that.
no, that's
23
a
minutes after
23-minute headway. That means the bus comes at every 23 minutes. The bus is operating on a 23-minute headway. So you would see a bus, if you're standing at a stop, every 23 minutes, that bus would pass you.
Yes, sorry, that's
Correct.
what I was trying to say.
Yes,
Sorry
correct.
if I wasn't clear about
Mhm.
that. But then it gets slower in the middle of the day, it speeds back up, then
Yep.
it gets slower again in that.
That was correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I think it would be helpful next time we get a chart like this, if it's possible, to also have the line totals of ridership on this axis,
Sure.
that route.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like, sorry, Route 7.
Oh, by route.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes,
sorry,
we can do that.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
That's a different chart.
But we can
Yeah, I
definitely
think
provide
that
that
would
for
be
you.
helpful to see, kind of the
Yeah.
full scope of who's affected by these.
We definitely can bring that to you. We'll send it to you, but it's actually, anyone can access that. That is on our website right now.
Yes, the dashboard is
Yep.
lovely. Thank you. But it'd help to see it all at once. I don't know if we have paper wide enough for that, but
It's a lot. Did I answer your questions?
At the moment, yeah. I
Okay.
have some other.
You finished presenting?
Well, I wanted to look ahead as well, but
Yeah.
are any other questions on these tables before we move off of them?
So will you be my +1 to the Impact Nehemiah conference we got to go to, or will you be my +1?
No,
You looking at your plus one.
that's a policy discussion,
Yeah.
and we do not do policy.
So,
Or
Jane,
call a friend, phone a friend?
Well, it might be helpful at that point to actually to look ahead and talk about where we're
Yeah,
going, right?
I'm being silly. Go
No,
ahead.
no,
Yeah.
not entirely.
so, I am going to talk about the investment that we've made so that we can shore up where we are before we move forward. And so that's what I'm gonna talk about. And
And we can support you with materials, so
Right, I
that's,
know you
that's
said-
our presence.
600,000, and I missed one of them. I know collective bargaining and new maintenance position. What was the third one?
Replacing the federal funds,
That's right.
particularly so that we can continue to offer service fare-free,
Yeah.
which was subsidized by the feds previously. I'm sorry, by the state. Sorry, thank you, Go.
If I could complicate it a little, I guess. So and I can never remember this. CADCON had 3 plans, a shorter term one, and this is very important context that I forget to be nuanced about, that it's not just returning to pre-pandemic services, optimizations going on that have happened that have actively
Yes.
already made it more efficient and better. So I appreciate, we always need to, like, as council, be putting that forward. But there was that short-term plan that was with those optimizations sort of getting a little bit as the baseline, like pre-pandemic plus the optimizations. Then there was like a medium-term one, and then there was the longer-term, like big vision plan with the constrained vision of the regional transit vision plan. What are, even just ballpark, what are kind of the drivers needed for that, the smaller short-term one and then the medium-term?
Great. So, Councilor Payne, there's really 2 studies. And the 2 studies were, first, CAT did its own study, was the optimization study. That optimization study looked at kind of phasing in enhancements to increase our ridership without having to do a wholesale rework of our network. That plan looked at a couple of options. There was a preferred option that allowed us to get past pre-pandemic, but also get add more 30-minute routes, provide more service on Saturdays, and a much more robust system on Sunday. That number of operators needed is 82. That was the original plan. There's also in that plan, that was by Nelson Nygaard, a number of 101 drivers that gets us to 30-minute service with really robust service on the Saturday and the Sunday. We're looking at a lot of the routes on Saturday and Sunday also being 30 minutes by having 101 drivers. That is where that's the numbers that we have looked at. No one has looked at the numbers for how many drivers or buses are needed for the regional plan, which has a constrained and an unconstrained. The constrained numbers, I believe the TJPDC is looking at potentially getting a grant, a technical assistance grant from VDRPT to do exactly that. Look at those routes and then kind of lay out a preference, which one should be done in which order. So we would have a lay of the land and figure out where we were as a region go. And then that's on the constrained, and then you would do that same model on the unconstrained.
Right. Well, and obviously got to walk before we start being in the Olympic sprinting, but with the unconstrained and constrained regional transit vision plan. But and what was the number of drivers pre-pandemic?
Great question. So I had Chrissy's assistants and HR took a look at, in FY 20, when I first got here, there were 45 full-time operators. The rest of the drivers, we can't confirm the exact number, but it was like between 50 and 60 temporaries. Wow. That's how we were making the numbers work. Over time,
So between 5 and 15 more that were
5 and 15 more.
You said 50 and 60?
50 to 60 temporary
Additional.
drivers,
Top of the
additional.
45?
That's
Yes.
correct.
But they weren't full-time.
And what I mean by that is, when you look at the roles that were given to us, you had a driver who would maybe work 3 hours a week. They were still left on the road because they were there active, and they would come in every couple weeks and work 3 hours or work 4 hours, so they would continue to get a paycheck, right? So there was a lot of, when COVID hit, and a lot of those individuals did not have health care benefits. A lot of them left because they were concerned that if they got sick, it would add insult to injury, and there would be a high cost for their health care, right? So we lost, I remember, between 16 and 20 drivers from that pool immediately. And then others kind of wearied off as we went to a slower model in healthcare to protect our drivers during the pandemic. So we went to a kind of a 3-day schedule, which eliminated us having to use a lot of the temporaries. Coming out of that, though, a lot of those individuals, remember, this is the same group that has the CDL. They were in high demand. They were being courted by UTS, by our public on the pupil side and the county's pupil side. And then every other transit agency in the Commonwealth was also looking for CDL drivers. A lot of them went to other places. We've made an aggressive approach. We needed to change some of our routes. We got into a kind of a back and forth for trying to entice folks to come to us. We looked at incentivizing them by giving them health care. That worked for a couple years, and then there was an issue that when we were about to pull it off, that we were going to lose every single driver that had that. So roll forward, we got to the process of getting into a collective bargaining agreement. That helped quiet a lot of the tension, and that's where we are now. We have 66 drivers. I think we're making the most improvements that we possibly can with the 66, based on knowing that we need more drivers to really bring back a robust Sunday service as opposed to just putting 1 or 2 routes out there. It's a kind of a judgment call that I've made, meaning why put a very scaled down version on Sunday where only 1 or 2 routes run, as opposed to really putting the effort in and changing the weekday so we can make sure we maximize our ridership.
You say 66 are the number of positions, but you actually have 62?
We have 62 right now and 3 interviewed today. So
And you always gonna have 5 or 6 openings type of thing,
we're
just because of regular turnover.
Hopefully
We
not
have-
that many on a regular basis, is what he's trying to say.
yes, I'm hoping that we can get that number down. But we are also very cognizant of the fact that we have a number of older drivers that are at the end of 35, 40 years, and we're also planning for potentially losing them within the next 1 or 2 years. Not losing them, but retiring.
Yes, just retiring.
And some come back as temporaries, and others do not. But the goal is to get as many drivers as we can and provide you with the most service, the most efficient service that we possibly can.
But I think to me, it sounds like the bottom line, which comes down to council's decisions. You have and are always going to be as efficient as humanly possible with the amount of drivers we fund you to have. So we will always get that outcome. But what the community, I think, probably expect requires at least 80 some drivers, maybe even 101. At least my perception of like what the community is looking for in Sunday service, evening service.
And that's helpful to start to talk about the specific outcomes we're looking for, but I just wanted to make sure we also note that when we're talking about 82 drivers and adding additional service, that also means that we're talking about up to 12 mechanics. Am I getting that number right? And because the more the buses are running, the more maintenance work, both both the preventative maintenance and the actual, I want to say injury, but breakdowns, thank you. Injury to the buses. That's what and then the staff that clean the buses, and then there's the customer service and other support staff. So which kind of gets us to the next part of what I wanted to talk about, which is that we have a lot of big goals for our transit system. We got a lot of ambitious goals, which is positive and a good thing. Like, these are all the things we want to be going forward with around both the operations side, which we've talked about, and around the idea of alternative fuels, because we did an alternative fuel study. And what we are starting to understand is those represent a lot of big costs. And so one of the things that we have been talking about collectively is setting up a series of meetings with both council and with our regional partner, the county, and our funding partner, the county, to do a deep dive on all of these things. Do a deep dive on what we were just talking about, on those operational costs, and a deep dive on the facilities and the bus costs to achieve these goals. Facilities expansion, right? The actual facility out at Avon Street. So that you and the county collectively, and through CARTA, which we just established just recently, can have that context and that deep dive in order to make decisions about how we make improvements in the coming years, particularly these short-term improvements that we want to make to start moving service, but doing that in the context of kind of all of these costs, understanding these costs, and in the context of working with the county on identifying where our priorities exist for expanding service and the associated operating costs to get there.
Sorry, this is backing up just a bit. I didn't get a chance to chime in about the positions. You mentioned that some still come back as temporary drivers. What is our part-time driver situation at the moment?
Great question. So when they come back as a returning retiree. There's a limit on the amount of hours. They can only work 1,000 hours a year. Right now we have, I think, authorized, well, in the numbers, I think 10 authorized positions. I think we've got 4 that have come back.
And are those our only part-time drivers at the moment?
Those are our only part-time drivers at the moment.
And are we interested in expanding the number of part-time drivers available?
The part-time model has not worked here. We actually had 10 that were authorized 2 years ago. No one put in an application for any of them.
How many years ago?
2.
Okay.
2 years ago. And I think the reason is because those folks are in high demand, and they can go somewhere else and get full-time benefits. So I understand this is a great place to work, and I hope I do what we were supposed to do to make sure that it is a great place to work. But if you're going to give me a decent salary but no benefits, I'm going to probably go somewhere that I'm going to have a decent salary and benefits.
What does the part-time schedule look like for them? Is it just like, hey, we call you when you need you, or like, hey, we need you for 4 hours every Friday? Like, how does that scheduling work?
It can be both. So normally what happens is twice a year we do what's called run bid. Once we develop the pieces of work for everyone, the pieces that are left are divided into 20-hour blocks for part-timers. And then that means they have a set schedule. Now, there are some retirees who do not want a set schedule. They'll say that they want to come in and just sign up every other week or a couple of days. And they have the ability to do that. So it's really up to them at that point once they've retired.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we want to move away from that, because that is difficult to manage
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to rely on it.
And just to clarify the point, you probably are getting, but I just want to clarify the point, whether they're part-time or full-time, they need the CDL, but once they have the CDL, they're an incredibly marketable and desirable
Sure.
employee.
Yeah. I'm just wondering about, the amount of staff that you mentioned we had pre-pandemic. We were able to add additional service hours with that more flexible model, and so,
But with a degree of unreliability.
I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. The model that we were employing when it was pre-pandemic, and we had a high number of temporary folks, and we were working them, allowing them to work, not working them, allowing them to work 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours without benefits, went against the city's policy and making sure we treated everybody equally and fairly. We started making that transition. I don't remember whether it was which human resources director started that process, but we looked at the amount of hours our part-timers were having, and there was a concern about overworking them. We started making that change, and it's now allowed for them to work more than, I can't remember, is it 1,500 hours now? For a temporary, which is more than a retiree, but much less than a full-time employee. And the only model that we have right now where part-timers get benefits is on the pupil side of the house, because it's as equally as hard to get pupil drivers to come and stay.
Kind of by definition, part-time.
By definition, part-time.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll say I think the approach you laid out in terms of setting up those future work sessions or meetings, I think makes a ton of sense. Obviously, this will not get resolved this budget cycle. I think the bottom line is the cost of transportation has gone up, the cost of drivers has gone up. We've increased in 2 or 3 years, I think 5 million on an annual basis. If I'm remembering from looking at the budget right, something in that area, maybe that's off. And then this year around like $1 million or so has gone up. But I think the community is still, I think it's completely understandable that what they understand our transit goals to be in terms of city council just flat out require at least 80 drivers, probably really 100, and we just have to have meetings to figure out, given the cost increase, what is that dollar amount for us as the city, and then kind of just figure out how do we work backwards to plan to fund it, because it's going to be a significant cost that we just haven't met yet.
Yeah, and to the point earlier about CARTA, I mean, I think that is, you're exactly right. I mean, we need to get clear on what we need in terms of money and then make the pitch to the General Assembly, hopefully with a more favorable, review than we're getting recently, and get the money to do that. But I think you're right. We do need something like between 80 and 100 drivers to really pull off what the community wants.
And I was just going to add, part of the reason for this the core reason for this deep dive into these topics over the course of really the next several months into the summer with both us and the county and CARTA is to set us up so that we have a really early understanding in going into next year's budget session of what we're building next year's budget around.
And we'll get to it in those conversations, but I think it will also be important just to confront in terms of the zero emission buses plans. That was in a context where the only thing that made it financially feasible in any way is federal funding, which completely changes the local cost benefit analysis.
Yep.
Those being gone are going to be a big discussion of.
Worth a revisit.
I mean, it's just a reality.
And I know this is something that we've heard before, but I think we need to continue to focus on our busiest lines and prioritizing the frequency on those.
The priority is, from what I understand and having conversations with council, is that we wanted to try to get to a 30-minute model first.
Yes.
So that is what you are seeing in the progression of the frequency. So we are making changes to the system to try to get to a 30-minute model first before we give anyone 15-minute service or better. And we don't want to have situations where we are causing a disparate impact on some communities because we have less service or less service in the area where we have really high frequency where folks who are considered choice riders. We just got to be careful. There's some analysis that we do when we make these changes. It's a Title VI analysis we have to get done. We just don't want to we don't want the federal government to come in and take a look at our system and say we are causing issues with communities where you have low-income individuals and you're not providing them a decent amount of service. So that's why the approach that I've taken with the team and what we're starting to see here is we're going to give everybody a decent amount of service, meaning the 30-minute model. Then we can have really robust conversations about a 5 or a 7 who is worthy of having high frequency. And then I think that passes the smell test with the feds.
Okay, yeah, because that's kind of why it would be useful to have the per route ridership, so we know
I can send that to you.
who's getting in this all at once, the view all at once.
Right,
It
well,
would
and
be
we
two charts anyway. The frequency chart and then the ridership chart are two different things. And it would be, I don't even know how to display both of them together. What you would see a chart is the frequency above, and then we put the ridership numbers below it. So you look at the two charts in comparison.
It does I guess.
Are you just looking for total?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And I don't know if it's
Just the total
monthly
rider?
or yearly or but it would be like 5
For
total
the whole year.
ridership.
Yeah, so the ridership you have at the bottom that we show by year, that is a total for the whole system.
Yeah.
But we also have a total broken down for every single route.
Yeah, and
Right.
so that number would be great, just right there.
Just add it on the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one more column.
And that's on the data portal, right? I think so, yeah.
That information's available through the data portal as well, yeah. And I just want to note that these are all kinds of things that we're going to dig deep into, so there's clear understanding, and then the opportunity to also, understand everything that Garland's talking about in terms of Title VI and our responsibilities to provide fair, equitable service, and then layer that into the policy conversation around where we want to invest and what outcomes and services we're trying to get to.
That's it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
And thanks for the big,
And this was,
it's definitely easier to read.
Yes, yes.
Take a shot at my slide.
So I'm Sam, but in preparation for April the 8th, when we have to talk to Christian, at the Impact, it's Christian Muslim.
Faith community.
Faith community, thank you. It's getting late and I'm getting in trouble now, so we're gonna need some
Yeah, Mr. Freeze will prepare that for you with our comms director, make sure that you have, because he wrote the note, so he can put those together with her and get that to you,
It's nice to have like all these positions filled, right?
isn't it?
Yes.
So now we were supposed to have time for public comment on the CIP, but I'm not sure there's any public left.
Wait, my hopes. Is there any, Keena, you have anyone just sign up? So is that?
Got one more?
Yeah.
Sam's gonna take his pass.
Yeah, maybe we can do this quickly. This slide summarizes the follow-up conversation from last Thursday night, where you all were given the opportunity to consider spending the $1,002,001 that have been identified as a council discretionary fund, which incorporates your current strategic initiatives fund, which in the budget I proposed increasing to $500,000. That $1 million then was shared with you at the same time that we gave you the results of the Vibrant Community Fund and HOPS results. And the indication that I was making to you at that time was that if you would do your first review of Vibrant Community and confirm you were satisfied with the breakdown of the recommendations, then any adjustments that you would like to make, being increasing and or funding those that had no funds, as well as adding any groups that were not even being considered at that time by using this particular fund. Through that robust conversation that you had last week, we were able to conclude that follow-up conversation led to this list that you see, starting with $250,000 to BRAC, our Continuum of Care, to replace a lost grant for homeless services, $162,000 to PHA for the replacement of funds lost for an eviction prevention program, and those funds would support staff salaries, $50,000 for PHA and eviction prevention direct cash assistance, adding $43,150 to Boys and Girls Club, making their VCF allocation $116,000, or their city allocation $116,000. $28,800 to Lighthouse Studios, which funds 2 programs for a total of $40,000. Adding $6,000 to Loaves and Fishes, increasing their total funding to $50,000. Adding $1,200 to Piedmont Casa, total funding $10,000. $6,600 Live Arts, total funding $16,000. $7,100 additional to Legal Aid Justice Center to make their total $40,000, and $1,500 to Sarah, increasing their total funding to $25,000, which is $556,350,000. We also had identified in the CIP $104,261 that was not to the results of prior work done, project completed, and that was the balance. And that was indicated by you all as of interest in using to fund your redirection of funds to the Dogwood Veterans Memorial to indicate the support for the project that they are working to raise funds and ultimately construct. Therefore, you would have spent $660,611 of the $1,002,001, leaving you with a balance of $341,390, which means you successfully met the request that I made to you to please not spend all the money, because you're going to get other requests over the course of FY26, which does not begin until July 1st. And that would allow you the flexibility of being able to consider any request at that time using that fund, because as the budget closes, it gets harder to identify things that are spontaneous. And then additional notes is that you all indicated in the meeting last week removing $4,200 that have been recommended for funding to Fralin Museum and to redistribute those funds over arts and event sponsorships, which I would do. And we identified for you that there was a calculation error for Bridgeline, which meant that we shorted the recommendation. So we would be adding $37,040 to make their total allocation of funds $56,780. And also through your conversations this week, there appeared to be enough support for adding $137,000 for CRHA's resident services. So what I'm looking for from you is support for this being it. And then we know that we are done with this part of the process of the budget consideration. And then we will be preparing to execute this as the result of your efforts.
So does that mean that from the 341, 390, we would subtract 137?
No, you would not. You would leave the Fralin 4,200 we would address through taking those funds and doing whatever. And then I have to add the $37,000 and $137,000 as additional funds needed to address. I didn't take that out of your money because I would have then dropped your number lower. So that means
I'm confused about that.
So we still have 341.
You still have 341,000. I'm only indicating that because those are changes to what came to you as recommendations. Chrissy and I will find the 137 plus 37,000 to make those two things happen. We anticipate that we're going to be bringing you additional funds because we have one more check-in on revenue projections. We feel very confident it is going to be at least that amount, but the question is how much more.
Great.
I guess that answers my question, but, I was curious if anyone was interested in, removing, $50,000 for PHA eviction prevention cash assistance as part of covering that, just because, as I understand it, that's not operational, and obviously they would like it, but could do the program without it. Just thinking about, is there a way to get there, through cuts as well?
Yeah, I would just say to you that we are confident, and this is always our process. There's always one last revenue projection update before the budget closes. So we know that will happen, and it will identify some funds, and we feel confident it'll be at least that. So there's not a question it's not a trade-off request that we're making to you. That would be your choice.
I know we've been talking about the Dogwood Memorial today. Were we talking about actually $100,000, or were we talking about 104 and just loosely?
Well, there's 104,000. If we don't put the $4,261, that means I have an account with $4,261 sitting. That would annoy me.
We could put it in contingency.
Well, we could move it to the contingency and clear it and just make that 100,000 if
It
that's your
wouldn't go-
desire.
It wouldn't go back into the 341 balance to make that 345?
It would, but that, because it's a different source out of the CIP, it's really not worth it to maintain that for you, because then you are limited to only a CIP eligible activity. It would just be cleaner to just say, if it's 100,000, we give Dogwood 100 and we just move the 4,261 to the contingency.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, I'm supportive of this, and we all got the email today about the Tonsillar League, and I know things like that is gonna be coming up.
Yes, we've been hearing from nonprofits regularly at this point. So, again, I need an indication from you, because this is just my summation of what I read through your messages. That would be 3 people at least telling me yes, and Counselor Ostrand just made a proposed change, so I would need to hear clarity on that as well.
It's fine if they want to move the 4,000 to some other city's
Just
got.
make it clean.
you know,
Okay.
neighbors,
Move it in contingency.
Whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's council action, so I'm just making sure you
Yes.
said that's what you want.
Yep.
Yeah, make it
Okay.
nice and clean, yeah.
All right.
I'm supportive of it. I think he's giving the holy hands up. Lord,
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
with
I
that.
can live with it, but would make some cuts, but maybe I'm alone there. In terms of like PHA, legal aid, I think, I don't, operationally, I just don't think they need them.
So I think that you have a majority for that.
We'll make the change and we'll move the 4,261 to the CIP contingency.
And just one final note, we do not have a work session next week. There's neighborhood leaders meeting on Thursday night, so we will not get back to, we'll have a public hearing on April 7th, which is on the tax rate. You'll also see the budget ordinance or resolution for the first time. It will not include any of these amendments that we've talked about. It will just be the proposed budget.
You said the 14th, right?
On the 7th. That's in a regular council meeting.
yeah, yeah.
That'll be that public hearing. And then we'll have a final work session where we'll bring out the spreadsheet and do the tallies on April 10th. That'll be our wrap-up. And then we'll get together on the 14th for a short meeting to actually vote and approve the budget.
Okay. That's it?
That's it?
No one is,
Move we adjourn.
yep. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, stand
Yes.
up. And all, okay, Stacy.